If you want to start a business that makes millions in 2025, you should start a service business. I spent 20 years in the service business space. I've made multiple 8 figures with my own company, and I've helped countless others do the same with their service businesses. So I'm going to share the 4 best service-based businesses you can start today and scale past $1 million a year. Let's break them down. Every successful service business follows this repeatable framework. You get this right, you can scale to 7 or even 8 figures. Phase 1 of building the company is about getting the foundation right and in place. We need to get all the core functions of the business consistent and systemized. It's gonna include 5 main areas. First, we need numbers and economics and a business plan. So this is just tracking all the key metrics in the business and the financials. So we're actually running a business by the numbers. And we need marketing, generating potential customers, sales, which is the process to turn potential customers into paying customers, as well as pricing. And then delivery, how we actually deliver on our promises to customers, including labor, materials, costs, profitability on that delivery. And finally, we need some administrative and tech, which is usually your CRM and how you're keeping track of all customer data. We call this the foundation of the business, and it's where everything starts. We need to do 2 things as the owner of the business. The first is we need to be able to execute on all 5 of those things. And 2, we need to systemize or document the systems for all 5 of those parts of the business. Once we get the foundation complete, then we move into phase 2, which is really where the growth and scale happens. Phase 2 is primarily 2 things. 1 is gonna be building the team. We're gonna be hiring out people to fill each of those core functions. Someone who's gonna be accountable for sales, someone who's gonna be accountable for delivery, and usually an administrator who can help out with updating numbers and tech. Marketing is gonna usually stay with the business owner for a while. So in phase 2, we're making key hires and we're scaling marketing. We want more marketing coming through the whole business to create more opportunities, and then we just need to start to staff it up. If we want to grow the business more, we need more marketing coming through this pipeline with more people to support the marketing that's coming through the pipeline. And the only difference between a business that's doing 1 million and 10 million is there's more marketing and more people, and they're built on the same core foundation with these core functions in the business, which have been documented and tracked. Every service business follows this growth framework, which makes them very scalable and very profitable. In 2019, I was brought on as an advisor to a venture-backed startup out of New York City. They had raised $25 million from VCs, and they had all this research and data on why they were gonna go and attack the home service space. They said, hey, look at this huge opportunity. There is no brands that own any of the home service spaces. In fact, the largest market leader in any home service at the time was Orkin, which is in pest control, and they had 12% market share. There is a huge opportunity. When you look at home services, these services typically apply to homes and businesses. So there's a residential aspect to it and a commercial aspect to it. And in home services, these are maintenance services. They're things that need to be done. Every house, every building needs to be maintained, needs to be taken care of. And as far as I can tell, they're not taking houses down, they're building more houses. They're building more buildings. The market is literally expanding. And as labor costs go up, literally the market goes up because it's a labor-driven market. As material costs goes up, the cost of services goes up. So these services are huge. There's a giant market for them. They're growing. They grow at the rate of inflation on labor and materials as well. They grow with more buildings being made, and there's no market leaders. So we have this amazing opportunity for building a business in a giant market, but we don't need to build that big of a business to make a life-changing business. And finally, service-based businesses are relatively easy to start. They often have pretty low startup costs, which I'm gonna walk you through how you can start most of these businesses with very little money up front. They are highly profitable when they're run properly and efficiently, and there's tons of room to grow and scale because of the massive market segmentation. So let's start with business number 1. This is one of the easiest, fastest, most profitable service businesses you can start today. A painting business. I've seen painting companies grow to $50 million a year. Recently, I was talking with some of the higher up people at Sherwin-Williams, and they shared with me that in Colorado, they had about $258 million in paint sales in a year, and they had about 58% market share. So we can say, hey, there was about $500 million in paint that was sold in Colorado along the Front Range in 1 year. And if you just do backwards math, we can know that that puts the painting applications market at about $1.5 to $2.5 billion a year. Big range. The point is, there is an enormous market. There's billions of painting being done on about a 2-hour corridor in just Colorado. Every single house you see needs to be painted inside and out. Exteriors need to be constantly painted, sometimes to change color, but always to be maintained. This whole industry is dominated by a ton of small players. Starting a painting business requires very little cash to get started. In fact, when I started my painting company, I literally started it with $200 before I started making profit. I made $4,000 in profit in my first month. You can start a painting business with almost no money out of pocket. A lot of people know how to do painting. You could literally even go paint somebody's room yourself to make cash flow right away. So there's very few startup costs to get into the painting business. It's also a very profitable, cash flow friendly business. People who want to get painting done, they don't get estimates because they want to paint next year. People get a painting estimate when they want to get painting done. So they say, hey, I want an estimate. They say, yeah, I'd like to get it done in 4 weeks. When we sell a job, we take a deposit and bring in positive cash flow. When we produce a job, we finish the job, we paint the house, we get paid, we bring in positive cash flow. So it is a positive cash flow business where you can be out of the red, making profit within your first 30 days. It's also really easy to just get into the painting business. There's almost no barriers to entry. Most places across the United States don't even require licensing. So you literally can register a business and be in business the next day. So there's very few barriers to entry. The way that the business model works is it's pretty simple. We really have these core functions we talked about earlier. We need to track our numbers, and then we need to do marketing. Marketing is really straightforward. Every house and building is a potential customer. There's a number of different ways we can get in front of those customers to see just who's interested. When people are interested, they raise their hand. Then we have sales. So we generate potential customers, then we got to turn those customers into paying customers. The bar for professionalism is still quite low in this industry. A lot of people who don't communicate well, don't show up on time, don't have any professionalism in their process. It's not hard to stand out from the rest still. And then we got to deliver on these projects, and we can hire painters or we can hire subcontractors. And there's a lot of really really people out there who have extensive experience in painting who can do a really great job. We just have to find them by making a great offer. There's obviously solutions already created for your CRM and your tech and how you handle all of that. So it's a relatively simple business for building those core functions in phase one. Once we've done that, we can hire a project manager to oversee all the logistics for getting your houses painted. We can hire a sales rep or estimator to take care of that. And we can take the profits from the business and reinvest into more marketing to grow the company. Once you have that happening consistently, now we can start to grow. So that's how we start every one of these businesses. The next steps depends a little bit on the business and the different requirements with licensing. Service business number 2 is one that prints money if you do it correctly, a remodeling business. In 2019, we were about to have our first child, my wife and I, and we were getting our basement finished and remodeled. After talking to a couple companies, there was someone that was referred to me by someone I work with, and I trusted the referral. And so the guy came out and he met with us, found out what we needed and wanted. He went to put the whole thing together and told me the price, and we took out a home equity line of credit to get the job done, and our basement remodel was about $70,000. It took him about 6 months. In fact, my mom's house started being built at the same time our basement remodel started, and they finished at about the same time. It was a really awful experience. It took him forever. He was not organized. He was not particularly professional. I didn't know this from the sales process. It wasn't until a couple years later that I found out how much profit he actually made on that project. And it was north of $35,000. And if he was just organized and did it well, he would have made a lot more on that project, and he would have done it faster. Starting a remodeling company is way more complex than starting a painting company, but the payoff is huge because you can still make 30 to 50% gross profit margins with average tickets that are 10 to 20 times bigger than what we talked about in painting, where you can have average job sizes of $50,000 to $75,000 a year and can start to grow that into even larger projects depending on the niche you grow into. However, there is more complexity with starting a remodeling company. There's going to be more requirements with licensing. Oftentimes you're going to be considered a GC and you need a GC license, which sometimes requires a year or 2 or 4 of apprenticeship. You also have a lot more complexity with understanding more moving parts. When you're doing remodeling, you need to be up to date on all the different trades. You need to understand enough about electrical, HVAC, plumbing, drywall, finishes. We could just go through all the sub-trades, but you need to know a lot more trades. You also need to stay up to date with code. So Building codes are always changing, and you need to make sure you're operating by code. So there's a lot more to know, and there's a lot more complexity. Now, this is a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing about it is there's a lot more to learn. There's a larger barrier to entry, so it's harder to get into the business. There's also a barrier to entry with just learning all of that. The benefit to that is less people do it. So there's far less competition in that line of work. And the opportunity is significant because there is tons and tons of remodeling being done. And the job sizes are substantial and the profit is great. And when you do put those systems in place with your foundation and those core functions, you can scale this business and make a way bigger business with less clients because of the size of the jobs. The business model works similar to all of the others, where we basically have to set up the core function of the business of how are we gonna generate leads, what's our sales process look like, and then how do we deliver on that. We need to understand a lot more about different trades, and the delivery is the complex part. If you're getting into a remodeling business, you would want to start by staying niche to minimize complexity. So you might start with, hey, let's just do bathroom remodels, or let's just do basement remodels, or just basement finishes. You start with a niche so that you can be more laser focused on customers, and you remove complexity from the business to make it a little more manageable to scale that first level. And then you can add more complexity to the business as you go. Service business number 3 is one that almost nobody is talking about, which is decks and fences. I live in a house, but my house that I live in right now, we're right next to a bunch of other houses, and we have these tiny little side yards. And our tiny little side yard wasn't fenced in, and we had a dog. And we wanted our dog to be able to go in and out of the house so that he could go to the bathroom. And so I needed to get a fence put in around my tiny little side yard. So I called up several companies, and a couple didn't even get back to me. And there was 3 companies that did get back to me. And the first guy said nothing on the phone. He basically just answered and like booked a time to show up and sent me no materials, nothing else. He showed up and just asked to see the backyard, and then basically said, cool, I'll put it together and I'll email it over. And that was that. He didn't ask questions. There was nothing about asking about needs. There was no options he gave me around fences. Like, there was no education at all. I mean, I'm in the home service business. I know what a sales process should look like. And I was very underwhelmed by what happened. So, and then the next guy came out and he was late, and it was a very similar process. Third guy came out and he actually talked to me for about 15 minutes. That was about it, but he did talk to me for about 15 minutes. I ended up hiring him because I needed to hire somebody, and the fence was $3,500. It took them a day to install, and I was blown away. I was blown away that that little fence cost almost as much as painting an entire house, and I was blown away at how much profit they must have made on that fence because I could look up the materials. It wasn't much, and the labor was a day and a half. And I was blown away at how I called 5 companies, 2 didn't respond, and the remaining 3 were completely unprofessional in their approach, which tells me there's a huge opportunity there. If you're gonna build a fence company, you will also build a deck company. It's not gonna be as big of a market as some of the other service businesses. However, it's still a business that you can build into the multi-millions, and there's still a lot of demand. There's far, far less competition in this niche because it's small. So decks are gonna be a lot more expensive. You put those 2 businesses together with doing fences and decks, and you can also even throw in staining fences as part of the suite of services. And if we throw that in as well as a specialty fence company. So the pros is we've got a pretty low startup cost. There's pretty low barrier to entry to getting into decks and fence building in most places. There's very little competition in this niche. It's just not thought of by most people. Yet there's still plenty of opportunity and plenty of market cap to build a multi-million-dollar deck and fence company, and the profit margins are really healthy. The downside to deck and fence is it's a smaller market. Some of the market is more of a luxury market, and you might need to invest in a little bit of equipment to build this company out. Service business 4 is one that's easy to scale fast, upwards of millions of dollars a year, a roofing company. I know people who have grown from 3 million a year to 13 million a year in roofing, and they've done it fast. Just like with painting, every single building has a roof. Every house, every commercial building has a roof, needs a roof, and those roofs need to be maintained, and often they need to be replaced. So it's a really interesting business because you can have these huge job sizes and they can be delivered so fast, which always blows my mind that it's like we put on a $50,000 roof today. Something else to know about how the roofing business works is there's basically 2 types of roofing businesses. So one is insurance work in markets that have a lot of weather and damage, there's a lot of insurance work. Get a lot of hail and wind and damage to roofs that then are covered by insurance. And so when there's a big hailstorm, there is insane amounts of money where some friends of mine, they literally couldn't staff up fast enough. It's like collecting money. There's a huge opportunity there, but there's also some risk there. And then there's retail markets that are focused on re-roofing, just the normal needs. So we're putting roofs on new homes and new construction. We're putting roofs that need to be up, improved and fixed or repaired or replaced on buildings or homes that people are often paying out of pocket, or they're taking out a home equity line of credit to pay for those roofs. So these are two different business models, tons of opportunity in both. In both of these businesses, the roofs are just as expensive, the job sizes are just as much, and it's a relatively simple business. Again, there's things to learn in all these businesses, but it's not that complicated of a business once you get into the weeds and learn what you need to learn about it. Another benefit to roofing is in most cases, there's not a lot of barriers to entry. It's pretty easy to get started. You usually don't have licensing requirements, so it's pretty easy to get your foot in the door with those businesses. In insurance, all of this work is just getting handed out. So my buddies were just cleaning up, basically collecting money, and that money is through insurance. So homeowners say yes, and then you have to deal with their insurance to actually get paid and supplemented. The really great thing about that is it's like collecting money. The insurance companies have to pay, the customers just hire you if you're just gonna take care of it for them. So it's really easy. The downside of that is because you're being paid out by insurance, you're waiting sometimes months to be paid. So they're carrying sometimes $1 to $2 million in receivables, which can put a lot of strain on cash flow and kind of be challenging for a business. There's also a lot of competition in the roofing space, particularly with private equity coming in. So there's been a lot of action in private equity coming into the HVAC space and also into the roofing space. So there's a lot of money coming into roofing and there's some consolidation happening. However, I wouldn't be too worried about that because the size of the market is so big and it's not that difficult to go and capture enough of the market where you can build a multi-million-dollar business that can completely change your life. All right, so in summary, roofing has huge demand. Like there's an absolutely huge market out there. It's growing, it's recurring, tons of opportunity. There's a huge job size. The delivery is fast. There's pretty low barrier to entry. You can start with relatively low startup costs. You can start making money pretty quickly and turning things around fairly quickly. And you can build a company to $1 million plus pretty fast because of the job size. Overall, all four of these businesses can easily be scaled to 7 to 8 figures and create huge opportunities for business and for life. The key to success in any of these business models is the framework we talked about initially. Build the foundation and core functions and then scale systematically. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. We got a lot more good stuff coming.